Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Setup. Emmanuel Dickinson had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in military intelligence had taught him to spot deception from a mile away, to analyze micro-expressions, and to trust his instincts above all else. But lying in his hospital bed, recovering from what the doctors called a minor cardiac episode, he realized he'd been blind to the most important deception of all. The heart attack hadn't been random. Emmanuel was 42, in excellent physical condition despite his sedentary work as a private security consultant. He'd maintained his fitness religiously since leaving the service, knowing that his past had made him enemies. What he hadn't expected was for the enemy to be sleeping in his bed. The tests showed trace amounts of a beta blocker that shouldn't be there, Dr. Albert Lindsay had whispered during his private consultation. "Someone's been dosing you, Mr. Dickinson. Slowly, methodically. Probably in your coffee or food over several months." Emmanuel's jaw tightened as the pieces fell into place. The fatigue he'd attributed to work stress. The occasional dizziness Sherry had dismissed as aging. The way she'd insisted on making his morning coffee every day for the past 6 months, claiming it was her way of showing love. Sherry Dickinson, his wife of 8 years, was trying to kill him. But why now? Why after all this time? Emmanuel had met Sherry when she was a struggling single mother, working double shifts at a diner to support her 5-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. He'd fallen for her resilience, her determination, and yes, he'd fallen for little Molly too. The girl had never known her biological father, and Emmanuel had legally adopted her when he and Sherry married. Now, as Emmanuel stared at the hospital ceiling, listening to the steady beep of monitors, he began to construct the timeline. 6 months ago, Sherry had started the coffee routine. 6 months ago, she'd also joined a new gym, started working out with a personal trainer. She'd been coming home later, claiming longer sessions. Her phone had developed a password she'd never shared. The door opened, and Emmanuel quickly closed his eyes, feigning sleep. Through barely open lids, he watched Sherry enter with a man he recognized from the gym's website, Gregory Sheldon, personal trainer and, apparently, his wife's lover. "How much longer do we have to keep this up?" Gregory whispered, his hand finding Sherry's waist. "Not much longer," Sherry replied, her voice cold. "The doctor said his heart is weakened. Another month of the medication in his system, maybe 2, and it'll look completely natural." Especially with his military background, everyone expects veterans to have health problems. Emmanuel's blood ran cold, but he kept his breathing steady, his expression unchanged. These weren't the words of a woman who'd accidentally poisoned her husband. This was premeditated murder. "What about the kid?" Gregory asked. "Molly's not his biological daughter. Once he's gone, I'll contest the adoption. She'll go to her real father or into the system. Either way, she won't be my problem anymore." Emmanuel had heard enough. As their voices faded down the hallway, he opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling with new clarity. Sherry didn't just want him dead. She wanted to destroy everything he'd built, everything he'd loved, including Molly, the little girl he'd raised as his own daughter. But Emmanuel Dickinson wasn't the type of man to go quietly into the night. He was the type of man who'd spent 2 decades learning exactly how to destroy his enemies completely and utterly. And now, Sherry and Gregory had just declared themselves his enemies. Reaching for his phone, Emmanuel began making calls. His first was to his old teammate from military intelligence, Isaac Spence, who now ran a private investigation firm. His second was to Javier Walsh, a man who specialized in electronic surveillance and digital forensics. His third was to Richard Harding, Sherry's own father. It was time to remind everyone exactly who Emmanuel Dickinson really was. Chapter 2. The Invitation. "Richard, it's Emmanuel," he said when his father-in-law answered. "I need to ask you and Laverne a favor." Richard Harding had been a career police officer before retirement, and Emmanuel had always respected the older man's no-nonsense approach to life. More importantly, Richard had been the one to walk Sherry down the aisle, telling Emmanuel privately that he'd never seen his daughter so happy. "Of course, son. What do you need?" "The doctors want to keep me here for observation a few more days, and Sherry's been so stressed. I was thinking maybe you and Laverne could take her and Molly camping up at Pine Lake. Give her a chance to relax, get some fresh air." There was a pause. "That's thoughtful of you, Emmanuel. But are you sure you'll be okay alone?" "I'll be fine. The nurses here take good care of me. Besides, I think Molly would love it." She's been asking about camping for months. Well, if you're sure, I'll call Sherry tonight. After ending the call, Emmanuel allowed himself a small smile. Pine Lake was a 3-hour drive from the city, far enough to isolate his targets, but close enough for his plan to work. More importantly, it was in the middle of a dead zone for cell phone coverage, something he'd discovered during his own family camping trips there. Isaac arrived that evening, looking like any other hospital visitor carrying flowers and balloons. But hidden in the bouquet was a state-of-the-art recording device, and in the balloon strings were microcameras. "You always did like the complicated plans," Isaac said, settling into the visitor's chair. "Wouldn't it be easier to just expose them and walk away?" "Walking away isn't in my nature," Emmanuel replied, his voice hard. "Sherry made this personal the moment she decided to poison me. She made it unforgivable when she talked about abandoning Molly." Isaac nodded. He'd known Emmanuel long enough to recognize that tone. In Afghanistan, that tone had meant enemy combatants were about to have a very bad day. "What do you need me to do?" "I need complete surveillance on the camping trip. I need to know every word they say, every move they make. And I need you to be ready to move when I give the signal." Over the next 2 days, Emmanuel played the part of the recovering patient perfectly. He was weak but grateful when Sherry visited, affectionate but understanding when she explained she'd be taking Molly camping with her parents. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he told her, squeezing her hand. "You've been working so hard taking care of me. You deserve a break." Sherry's smile was perfect, loving, concerned, devoted. If Emmanuel hadn't heard her conversation with Gregory, he might have believed it himself. "Are you sure you'll be okay without us?" she asked. "I'll miss you terribly, but I'll be fine. Just promise me you'll take lots of pictures of Molly. You know how she loves the outdoors." That Friday evening, as Emmanuel watched them drive away in the family SUV, Sherry, Molly, and Richard and Laverne Harding, he activated the first phase of his plan. Javier's surveillance equipment was already in place at Pine Lake, disguised as part of the natural environment. Every conversation, every movement would be recorded. But Emmanuel wasn't content to simply watch. He had something much more elaborate in mind. At sunset on Saturday, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he knew who it would be. "Dad, help." Molly's voice was choked with tears. "They refused to bring me home. I'm all alone." Emmanuel's heart clenched at the genuine fear in his daughter's voice, but he kept his own voice calm and soothing. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" "They left with Mom. She said I was being a baby for wanting to come home. They just left me here at the campsite." Emmanuel had expected Sherry to show her true colors eventually, but this was even worse than he'd imagined. To abandon a 7-year-old child in the wilderness. "Listen to me, Molly. I need you to stay exactly where you are, okay? Don't leave the campsite. Daddy's going to handle this." After comforting Molly and ensuring she was safely in the locked SUV with snacks and water, Emmanuel called Sherry immediately. She answered on the first ring, and he could hear Gregory's voice in the background. "Emmanuel? What's wrong?" "Sherry, Molly just called me crying. She says you left her alone at the campsite. What the hell is going on?" Sherry laughed, actually laughed. The sound was cold and cruel, nothing like the woman he'd thought he'd married. "She's a mistake that I should have gotten rid of 7 years ago," Sherry said, her voice carrying clearly through the phone. "Maybe some time alone will teach her to stop being such a clingy little brat." Emmanuel closed his eyes, his free hand clenching into a fist. Every word was being recorded, both by his equipment and by Isaac's team. But more than that, Richard and Laverne were hearing their daughter reveal herself as a monster. "You left a 7-year-old child alone in the wilderness," Emmanuel said slowly, dangerously. "She's not my responsibility anymore," Sherry replied. "And soon, she won't be yours either." The line went dead. Emmanuel sat in his hospital bed, staring at the phone. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. By the time Sherry realized what was happening, it would be far too late. He placed one final call of the night. "Isaac, it's time. Execute Phase 2. Chapter 3, The Discovery." The call came at dawn, just as Emmanuel had arranged. His phone buzzed, showing the number for the county sheriff's office. "Mr. Dickinson? This is Sheriff Wallace Pennington. I'm afraid I have some difficult news to share with you." Emmanuel sat up in his hospital bed, his voice carefully modulated to show concern but not panic. "What's happened?" "We found a body in the woods near Pine Lake. The identification suggests..." "Mr. Dickinson, I'm very sorry, but it appears to be your wife, Sherry. Emmanuel allowed the silence to stretch, the way a man in shock might. That can't be right. She's camping with my daughter and her parents. Sir, I understand this is difficult. We're going to need you to come down and make a formal identification when you're released from the hospital. We've also located your daughter. She's safe and unharmed. We're bringing her back to town now. After ending the call, Emmanuel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The body, of course, wasn't Sherry. It was a Jane Doe from the county morgue, a victim of a car accident from 3 months ago whose body had never been claimed. Isaac's contacts in law enforcement had been very helpful in arranging the discovery. But Sherry didn't know that. Right now, according to Isaac's surveillance, she was hiding in a motel room with Gregory, watching the local news report about the tragic discovery at Pine Lake. The news anchors were speculating about a possible hiking accident, showing file photos of Sherry that Emmanuel had helpfully provided to the media. What Sherry was seeing was her own death being reported on television. And more importantly, she was seeing the massive life insurance payout that would be coming to her grieving widower, money she'd never be able to claim while dead. Emmanuel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. What the hell is going on? They're saying I'm dead. He didn't respond. Instead, he called his lawyer, Chad Davidson, who'd been briefed on the situation. Chad, I need you to begin the process for collecting on Sherry's life insurance policy. The police have confirmed her death. Of course, Emmanuel. I'm very sorry for your loss. The policy is for $2 million, correct? That's right. And I want to make sure Molly is taken care of. Can you begin the paperwork for me to claim full custody? With Sherry gone, there shouldn't be any issues. His phone buzzed again. Emmanuel, please call me. Something terrible has happened. I need your help. Then another. This is insane. I'm not dead. Call me back. Emmanuel smiled coldly and powered off his phone. The beauty of his plan was its simplicity. Sherry was now legally dead, which meant she couldn't access their bank accounts, couldn't use her credit cards, couldn't do anything that would leave a digital trail without exposing herself as a fraud. She and Gregory were trapped with whatever cash they had on hand. But more than that, if Sherry ever tried to prove she was alive, she'd have to explain why she'd faked her own death. The recording of her abandoning Molly and calling her a mistake would surface. Her affair with Gregory would be exposed. The slow poisoning of her husband would be investigated. She had two choices: remain dead and live as a fugitive with nothing, or expose herself and face charges for attempted murder, child abandonment, and insurance fraud. Dr. Lindsay entered the room, shaking his head sympathetically. Mr. Dickinson, I heard about your wife. I'm so sorry. Thank you, doctor. I just want to get out of here and take care of my daughter. Of course. Your blood work shows the toxins are clearing your system nicely. We can discharge you this afternoon. As Emmanuel signed the discharge papers, his phone, now powered back on, showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, all from unknown numbers. The messages grew increasingly desperate. Please, you have to help me. I can't access anything. The police think I'm dead. They won't listen to me. Emmanuel, I know we had problems, but you have to help me. I'm your wife. Gregory says this is all your fault somehow. What did you do? The final message, sent just minutes ago, showed the first crack in Sherry's composure. I know what you're doing. This won't work. I'll expose everything. Emmanuel deleted all the messages without reading them completely. Sherry could threaten all she wanted. She'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated exactly who she was dealing with. As he walked out of the hospital, Emmanuel saw Isaac waiting by a black sedan. In the back seat, he could see Molly's small form, and his heart clenched. Whatever else happened, he would make sure his daughter never felt abandoned again. How is she? He asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Scared, confused, but physically fine. She keeps asking about her mom. Emmanuel turned to look at Molly, who threw herself into his arms the moment she saw him. Daddy, I was so scared. Mommy left me all alone, and then the police came and said terrible things. I know, sweetheart, but you're safe now, and you'll never be alone again. I promise. As Isaac drove them home, Emmanuel's phone buzzed one final time. The message was from Gregory's number. We know where you live. We know where Molly goes to school. Stop this now, or we'll make you pay. Emmanuel showed the message to Isaac, who whistled low. They just made a big mistake, Isaac said. Yes, Emmanuel agreed, his voice deadly calm. They did. Threatening Molly had just moved this from a game of psychological warfare to something much more personal. Emmanuel had been planning to let them run, to let them live as fugitives with nothing. But now they'd crossed the line from betrayal to direct threats against his daughter. Now, they would learn exactly what happened to people who threatened Emmanuel Dickinson's family. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. Emmanuel's house felt different when he returned with Molly. The place that had once been a home now felt like a crime scene, filled with evidence of Sherry's deception. Every coffee cup in the kitchen was a potential murder weapon. Every photograph on the mantel was a lie. But Molly needed normalcy, needed to feel safe. So Emmanuel focused on being the father she needed while Isaac and his team swept the house for any surveillance equipment Sherry and Gregory might have planted. "Daddy, why did Mommy leave me?" Molly asked as he tucked her into bed that first night. Emmanuel chose his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, you need to know that I will never, ever leave you. Promise. I promise. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." After Molly fell asleep, Emmanuel joined Isaac in his home office, where multiple screens showed surveillance footage from Pine Lake and tracking data from various sources. "We've got them," Isaac said, pointing to a grainy image from a gas station security camera. They filled up 20 miles south of Pine Lake, heading toward the Mexican border. But they're not driving straight through. They're hopping from motel to motel, paying cash. How much cash could they have? Gregory cleaned out his savings account the day before the camping trip. Roughly $30,000. Sherry couldn't access your joint accounts without triggering alerts, so they're working with limited resources. Emmanuel studied the map on the screen, tracking their probable route. They're smart enough to avoid major highways and cities with extensive camera networks. But they made a mistake threatening Molly. "What's the play?" Emmanuel's smile was cold. "They want to make this about intimidation? Let's give them something to really be afraid of." Over the next 48 hours, Emmanuel put his plan into motion. Using his contacts from military intelligence, he began to seed information into the criminal networks that operated along the Mexican border. Word spread quickly through the underground. There was a bounty on two people traveling together, a man and woman matching Gregory and Sherry's descriptions. The bounty wasn't for death. That would be too easy. The bounty was for information leading to their capture, alive and unharmed. Emmanuel wanted them to feel hunted, to know that every criminal, every smuggler, every corrupt official between them and the border was looking for them. But that was just the psychological pressure. The real trap was much more sophisticated. Javier's been tracking their digital footprints, Isaac reported during their morning briefing. They think they're being careful, but Gregory can't help himself. He's been using burner phones to check his social media accounts. And Sherry tried to access her email twice yesterday. "Amateurs," Emmanuel said with disgust. 20 years ago, they would have been dead already. Maybe. But remember, they're not trained operatives. They're a cheating wife and her boyfriend who thought they could outsmart you. Emmanuel's phone rang. The caller ID showed the number from Molly's school. "Mr. Dickinson? This is Principal Renee Carr. I wanted to let you know that a woman came by this morning asking about Molly. She claimed to be her mother, but the description didn't match our records. Our security guard turned her away, but I thought you should know." Emmanuel's blood turned to ice. "Can you describe this woman?" "Blonde, about 5'6", wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. She seemed agitated when we asked for identification. After ensuring the school would be on high alert and arranging for additional security, Emmanuel hung up and turned to Isaac. "They're not running anymore. They're circling back. That's insane. They have to know we're watching for them. Desperate people do desperate things. And Sherry's always been impulsive when she's backed into a corner." Emmanuel thought back to the early days of their marriage, when Sherry had been struggling financially. When the power company had threatened to shut off her electricity, she hadn't called him for help. Instead, she'd confronted the meter reader with a baseball bat, demanding they turn the power back on. The situation had been resolved eventually, but it had shown Emmanuel a side of Sherry that was reckless and aggressive when threatened. Now, that same recklessness was driving her to take increasingly dangerous risks. "Double the security detail on Molly," Emmanuel ordered. "And I want surveillance on every approach to the house. If they're coming back, I want to know about it before they get within 5 miles of here." That evening, as Emmanuel was helping Molly with her homework, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Let's talk. Just you and me. No police, no lawyers. Midnight, the old warehouse district. Come alone. Isaac looked up from his laptop. It's obviously a trap. Of course it is. But it's also an opportunity. Emmanuel, you're not seriously considering this. They've made this personal by threatening Molly. I want to look them in the eye when I destroy them. But Emmanuel had no intention of walking into their trap unprepared. If Gregory and Sherry wanted to play games, he'd show them how the game was really played. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The warehouse district at midnight was exactly as desolate as Sherry had probably hoped. Empty buildings stretched for blocks, their broken windows staring down like dead eyes. Emmanuel parked his car 2 blocks away and approached on foot, his movements silent despite the gravel and debris scattered across the pavement. He wasn't alone, despite their demands. Isaac and his team were positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, equipped with night vision and long-range weapons. But more importantly, Emmanuel was wearing a Kevlar vest under his jacket and carrying enough firepower to handle whatever Gregory and Sherry had planned. The specified warehouse was a relic from the city's industrial past, 3 stories of rusted steel and crumbling concrete. Emmanuel could see light flickering through the windows on the 2nd floor, probably a camping lantern or flashlights. He entered through the main door, which hung open on broken hinges. The ground floor was empty except for old machinery and the occasional pile of homeless bedding. A metal staircase led up to the 2nd floor, and Emmanuel could hear voices echoing down. You sure he'll come alone? That was Gregory's voice, tense and worried. He'll come. Emmanuel always thinks he's the smartest person in the room. His arrogance will be his downfall. Emmanuel smiled grimly. After 8 years of marriage, Sherry still didn't understand who she'd married. He climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately making noise so they'd know he was coming. When he reached the 2nd floor, he found them waiting in what had once been an office space. Gregory stood near the windows, nervously gripping a pistol that looked far too large for his inexperienced hands. Sherry sat on a rusted desk, projecting confidence she clearly didn't feel. Hello, darling, Sherry said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You're looking well for a dead man. Not as good as you're looking for a dead woman, Emmanuel replied, stepping fully into the room but keeping his distance. How's the afterlife treating you? You think you're so clever, Gregory snarled, waving the gun. But we figured out your little game. You faked Sherry's death somehow, made everyone think she was dead. Did I? That's quite an accusation. Sherry slid off the desk, moving closer. The insurance company won't pay out on a fraud claim. When they investigate and find out I'm alive, you'll be the one facing charges. Interesting theory. There's just one problem with it. What's that? Gregory demanded. Emmanuel's smile was predatory. You're both assuming I want the insurance money. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. They'd built their entire counterplan around the assumption that Emmanuel was motivated by greed, that he'd faked Sherry's death for the $2 million payout. The insurance money was never the goal, Emmanuel continued, his voice conversational. It was just a tool to trap you both. You see, the moment Sherry tries to prove she's alive, she has to explain why she was hiding. And when that investigation begins, they're going to find some very interesting evidence. He pulled out his phone and played a recording. Sherry's voice, crystal clear, saying, she's a mistake that I should have gotten rid of 7 years ago. They'll find the recordings of you abandoning Molly. They'll find the medical evidence of you slowly poisoning me for months. They'll find Gregory's fingerprints all over our house, evidence of your affair. Sherry's face had gone pale. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? Gregory, did you know that every time you visited my house, you walked past 3 different security cameras? Did you know that the coffee maker you sabotaged still has your fingerprints on the interior mechanism? Gregory's hand was shaking now, the gun wavering dangerously. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, Gregory, what did you use to doctor my coffee? Beta blockers, right? Probably stolen from the pharmacy where your ex-girlfriend works. The same ex-girlfriend who's already been questioned by police about missing medications. Emmanuel could see the panic setting in. They'd thought they were so careful, so clever. But they were amateurs playing against a professional. Here's what's going to happen, Emmanuel said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You're both going to disappear. Permanently. Sherry is officially dead, and she's going to stay that way. Gregory is going to become a missing person. Tragic, really, a personal trainer who went hiking and was never seen again. You can't make us disappear, Sherry said, but her voice lacked conviction. Can't I? Sherry, you don't legally exist anymore. You have no identification, no access to money, no way to prove who you are without exposing your crimes. And Gregory, well, Gregory made the mistake of threatening my daughter. In one fluid motion, Emmanuel drew his concealed weapon and put 2 rounds center mass into Gregory's chest. The man dropped instantly, his own gun clattering across the floor. Sherry screamed, but Emmanuel's attention was already focused on her. Now it's just you and me, darling. The way it should have been from the beginning. Chapter 6. The Truth Unveiled. Sherry pressed herself against the warehouse wall, staring at Gregory's body in horror. You killed him. Yes, Emmanuel said simply, holstering his weapon. And unless you start telling me the truth, all of it, you'll join him. What truth? I don't know what you mean. Emmanuel sighed and pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph. It was a military service record, but not his own. Staff Sergeant Gregory Sheldon, discharged from the Army 3 years ago for theft and assault. 2 tours in Afghanistan, same time and place as me. Interesting coincidence, don't you think? Sherry's face crumpled. I don't understand. No, you don't. You never did. You thought you were seducing some random personal trainer, but Gregory sought you out specifically. He knew exactly who I was, and he knew exactly how much my life insurance policy was worth. Emmanuel began pacing, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining a lesson to a particularly slow student. Gregory wasn't your lover, Sherry. He was using you. The whole affair, the plan to kill me, the slow poisoning, that was all his idea, wasn't it? He convinced you that you deserved better, that I was holding you back. That's not. But her voice trailed off as the realization hit her. Gregory Sheldon stole classified information during his service in Afghanistan. Information he tried to sell to enemy forces. I was part of the team that caught him, testified at his court-martial, and made sure he was dishonorably discharged. Emmanuel pulled up another photo on his phone, Gregory in military fatigues, standing with a group of soldiers. He's been planning this for 3 years, Sherry. He found out where I lived, researched my family, and identified you as the weakest link. A woman with a history of financial struggle, a woman who might be convinced to betray her husband for the promise of easy money. Sherry slumped against the wall, the full scope of her manipulation finally becoming clear. He said he loved me. He said whatever he needed to say to get you to do what he wanted. And you fell for it because you wanted to believe it was real. Emmanuel's voice softened slightly, not with forgiveness, but with something like pity. Did you really think it was a coincidence that a man like Gregory would be interested in a woman like you? A personal trainer who could have any woman he wanted, choosing a married mother in her 30s? The cruelty of his words hit their mark, and Sherry began to cry. But Emmanuel felt no sympathy. She tried to kill him, tried to abandon Molly, and chosen to trust a stranger over the man who'd loved her for 8 years. Here's what I think really happened, Emmanuel continued. Gregory approached you at the gym, started flirting, made you feel special. He probably complained about his own money problems, mentioned how unfair it was that some people had so much while others struggled. Then he started asking innocent questions about me, about our finances, about our life insurance. Sherry's sobs confirmed his theory. And when you were completely hooked, when you thought you were in love, he suggested that life would be so much easier if I wasn't around. Maybe he even made it sound noble, like you'd be saving me from a life of stress and health problems. He said you were already sick, that the heart attack was natural, and we were just helping it along. Except I never had a heart attack, Sherry. That was the beta blockers Gregory gave you to put in my coffee. He was slowly poisoning me, using you as the delivery method. Emmanuel knelt down beside Gregory's body and went through his pockets, finding a cell phone and wallet. Inside the wallet was a photograph that made Sherry gasp. It was a picture of Molly leaving school. He was planning to kill Molly too, Emmanuel said quietly. Probably make it look like an accident. Can't have any loose ends when you're stealing $2 million. Sherry's crying turned to hyperventilation. No. He wouldn't hurt Molly. He promised she'd be safe. Gregory Sheldon was a traitor and a killer, Sherry. He would have done whatever was necessary to cover his tracks, including murdering the little girl you claimed to love. Emmanuel stood up, looking down at his wife with cold contempt. You didn't just betray me, Sherry. You betrayed Molly. You called her a mistake, abandoned her in the wilderness, and helped a man who was planning to kill her. I didn't know. Sherry screamed. I thought he loved me. I thought we were going to be together. And that makes it worse, not better. You were willing to murder your husband and abandon your daughter for a man you'd known for 6 months. Emmanuel pulled out zip ties from his jacket pocket. Turn around. What are you doing? You're coming with me. There are some people who want to talk to you about Gregory Sheldon and his other activities. People who don't care whether you live or die, but who need to know everything he told you. As he secured her hands behind her back, Sherry asked one final, desperate question. What about Molly? What happens to her? Emmanuel's answer was cold and final. Molly gets to grow up with a father who would die before letting anyone hurt her. You? You get to live with the knowledge that you threw away the only family who ever truly loved you. Chapter 7. The Judgment. The safe house Isaac had arranged was sterile and anonymous, the kind of place where difficult conversations happened far from prying eyes. Sherry sat in a metal chair, still zip-tied, facing a table where 3 men in dark suits reviewed documents and photographs. Emmanuel stood against the wall, watching as his former colleagues from military intelligence dissected Gregory Sheldon's life and activities. The dead man had been far more dangerous than even Emmanuel had initially realized. Sheldon wasn't just selling information, said Agent Saul Livingston, the lead investigator. He was part of a network that specialized in targeting military families. They'd identify veterans with substantial life insurance policies, then systematically infiltrate their lives. Sherry looked up sharply. There were others? For other families over the past 3 years, Agent Livingston continued. 2 successful murders made to look like suicide, 1 failed attempt that resulted in the target's suspicious death during a home invasion, and 1 where the wife figured out what was happening and went to the police. Emmanuel felt a cold satisfaction. He'd been right to trust his instincts about Gregory, but learning the full scope of the man's crimes made his death feel even more justified. Your husband, Agent Livingston said to Sherry, was target number 5. Except this time, they picked the wrong mark. Agent Jorge Hunter leaned forward. We need to know everything Sheldon told you about his associates, his methods, his future plans. Names, locations, anything you can remember. I don't know anything about other people, Sherry said desperately. Gregory said it was just us, just our plan. Think harder, Agent Livingston suggested. Phone calls he took in private. Meetings he mentioned. People he talked about. For the next 4 hours, the agents methodically extracted every detail of Sherry's relationship with Gregory. Emmanuel learned things about his own wife that disgusted him. How eagerly she'd embraced the idea of his death. How excited she'd been about the insurance money. How willingly she participated in each stage of the plan. But he also learned something else. Sherry truly had been nothing more than a useful idiot. Gregory had compartmentalized his operations so thoroughly that she knew nothing about his other victims or his broader network. There was one thing, Sherry said finally, her voice hoarse from hours of questioning. About 3 weeks ago, Gregory got a call from someone. He said it was his business partner and that they were discussing expanding operations. He mentioned something about a list of names. Agent Hunter exchanged glances with his colleagues. What kind of list? I don't know. But Gregory seemed excited about it. He said they'd identified at least 12 prime targets and that this could make them rich. Emmanuel pushed off from the wall. 12 more families. 12 more wives to be manipulated. 12 more children to be orphaned. We'll track down this network, Agent Livingston assured him. Gregory's death actually helps us. His associates will surface when they try to figure out what happened to him. After the agents left with their recordings and sworn statements, Emmanuel found himself alone with Sherry for the first time since the warehouse. She looked small and broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd tried to murder him. What happens to me now? She asked. That depends, Emmanuel replied. The agents have offered you a choice. You can cooperate fully with their investigation, help them identify and capture Gregory's network, and you'll be placed in witness protection with a new identity. And if I don't, then you go to prison for attempted murder, child abandonment, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. With Gregory dead, you're the only one left to face charges. Sherry was quiet for a long moment. What about Molly? What about her? Will I ever see her again? Emmanuel's answer was swift and merciless. No. Whether you choose witness protection or prison, you'll never see Molly again. I'm filing for dissolution of your parental rights. And given your recorded statements about her being a mistake you should have gotten rid of, no court will oppose me. She's my daughter too. No, she's not. You stopped being her mother the moment you abandoned her in those woods. You stopped being her mother when you called her a mistake. And you sure as hell stopped being her mother when you helped a man who was planning to kill her. Emmanuel moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Molly asked me if you were coming home. Do you know what I told her? Sherry shook her head. I told her that sometimes people we love turn out to be different than we thought. And that when that happens, it's okay to let them go and focus on the people who truly care about us. Emmanuel, please. I know I made mistakes, but... Mistakes? Emmanuel's voice cracked like a whip. You tried to murder me. You abandoned a 7-year-old child. You conspired with a man who was planning to kill her. Those aren't mistakes, Sherry. They're choices. And every choice has consequences. He turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I did love you once. I thought you were someone worth saving, someone worth building a life with. But the woman I loved never existed, did she? She was just a mask you wore until you found something better. That's not true. Sherry called after him. I did love you. I do love you. Emmanuel didn't turn around. If you had loved me, you wouldn't have tried to kill me. If you had loved Molly, you wouldn't have abandoned her. And if you had any real love in your heart, you would have seen through Gregory's manipulation. The door closed behind him with a final, decisive click. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Emmanuel stood in the kitchen of his house, making breakfast for Molly before school. The morning routine had become precious to him. The normalcy of scrambled eggs and orange juice, the sound of his daughter chattering about her upcoming science project, the simple pleasure of being alive to see another day. The coffee maker sat unused in the corner. Emmanuel had thrown it away the day after Sherry's arrest, unable to look at it without thinking about the poison that had nearly killed him. Now he drank tea, and Molly had developed a taste for hot chocolate. Daddy, is Mommy ever coming home? Molly asked suddenly, looking up from her cereal. It wasn't the first time she'd asked, and Emmanuel had learned to answer with patient honesty. No, sweetheart. Mommy made some very bad choices, and now she can't live with us anymore. Is she in jail? Something like that. In reality, Sherry had chosen witness protection over prison. The federal agents had relocated her to a small town in Oregon, where she was living under a new name and working as a waitress. According to their reports, she was cooperating fully with the investigation into Gregory's network, helping them identify and arrest 3 other conspirators. But for Emmanuel and Molly, she was simply gone. The divorce had been finalized, Sherry's parental rights had been terminated, and legally, Molly was now Emmanuel's daughter alone. I'm glad she's not coming back, Molly said quietly. She was mean to me at the camping trip. Emmanuel's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. Some people aren't good at being parents, sweetie. But you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's just you and me now. Promise. I promise. After dropping Molly at school, Emmanuel drove to his office. He'd officially retired from private security consulting. Using the life insurance payout, he'd never wanted to set up a trust fund for Molly's education and to invest in Isaac's private investigation firm. These days, Emmanuel specialized in a very particular type of case, helping other military families who suspected they were being targeted by predators like Gregory Sheldon. The network had been larger than anyone had initially realized, and breaking it up completely was going to take years. Isaac was waiting in the conference room with their latest case file. We've got another one, he said grimly. Air Force veteran in Phoenix, married 3 years to a woman he met at a gym. She's been encouraging him to increase his life insurance policy. Emmanuel opened the file, studying the photographs and background information. The pattern was always the same. A veteran with substantial assets, a new wife or girlfriend with financial problems, and a mysterious new friend who specialized in fitness and nutrition. How long have they been married? Emmanuel asked. 3 years. But get this, she had 2 previous husbands. Both died in accidents within 5 years of marriage. Emmanuel's blood ran cold. They weren't just dealing with opportunistic criminals anymore. They were looking at a serial killer. We need to move fast on this one, he said. If she's done this before. Already in motion. I'm flying to Phoenix tonight. But Emmanuel, there's something else you need to know. Isaac pulled out another photograph, and Emmanuel felt his world tilt. It was a surveillance photo of a woman entering a grocery store in Oregon. She was thinner than before, her hair was different, but there was no mistaking the face. Sherry violated her witness protection agreement, Isaac said. She's been trying to contact Molly through social media, using fake accounts. The marshals lost track of her 3 days ago. Emmanuel stared at the photograph, feeling a familiar cold rage building in his chest. She's coming back. That's what we think. The question is, what do we do about it? Emmanuel closed the file and stood up. Sherry had made her choice when she'd tried to kill him. She'd made it again when she'd abandoned Molly. And now she was making it a third time by violating the agreement that had kept her out of prison. We do what we should have done from the beginning, Emmanuel said quietly. We end this permanently. Isaac nodded. They both understood what that meant. Sherry Dickinson had died once already, officially and legally. Now it was time to make that death a reality. I'll make the arrangements, Isaac said. No, Emmanuel replied. This one's mine. Chapter 9, The Final Solution. Emmanuel found Sherry exactly where he'd expected, watching Molly's school from across the street, sitting in a stolen car with Oregon plates. She'd lost weight during her months in hiding, and her hair was now dark brown instead of blonde, but her obsessive focus on his daughter was unmistakable. He approached from behind, moving with the silent precision that 20 years of military training had ingrained in him. When he tapped on the passenger window, Sherry jumped so violently she nearly hit her head on the roof. Hello, darling, Emmanuel said, sliding into the passenger seat before she could react. You're looking well for a dead woman. Sherry's hand moved toward the door handle, but Emmanuel was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his grip just tight enough to remind her exactly how much stronger he was. Don't, he said quietly. We wouldn't want to cause a scene near Molly's school. I just wanted to see her, Sherry said, her voice barely a whisper. I haven't seen my daughter in 6 months. She's not your daughter anymore. Legally, biologically, or emotionally. You gave up that right when you tried to have her killed. I never. Gregory was planning to kill her, Sherry. You knew it, or you should have known it. Either way, you chose to help him rather than protect her. Emmanuel pulled out his phone and showed her a recent photo of Molly at her birthday party, surrounded by friends and smiling brighter than she had in months. Look at her, he commanded. Really look. When was the last time you saw her that happy when you were around? Sherry stared at the photo, and Emmanuel could see the moment when the truth finally hit her. Molly was better off without her. Had always been better off without her. The Witness Protection Program reported you missing 3 days ago. Emmanuel continued conversationally. Violation of federal protection agreements is a serious crime. But more importantly, you're now a security risk to an ongoing investigation. What does that mean? It means, darling, that you're officially expendable. Emmanuel pulled a small device from his pocket, a GPS tracker with a digital display. I've been following you for the past day. Did you know you stopped at 3 different ATMs trying to access accounts that don't exist anymore? You tried to use credit cards that were canceled months ago. You even went to our old house, apparently forgetting that I sold it after your death. Sherry's face was pale. I have nowhere else to go. No, you don't. And that's entirely your own fault. Emmanuel's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. Isaac's team just arrested the woman in Phoenix. Thanks to the information we gathered from Gregory's phone, we've now dismantled the entire network. 12 families are safe because we stopped Gregory Sheldon and his associates. I helped with that investigation, Sherry said desperately. I gave them everything I knew. Yes, you did. And in exchange, you were given a new life, a clean slate, and the chance to disappear forever. But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Emmanuel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You just couldn't accept that Molly doesn't need you anymore. That she's happier without you. That everyone is better off with you gone. Please, Emmanuel. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still her mother. I love her. No, you don't. If you loved her, you would have stayed away. If you loved her, you would have let her heal from what you did to her. If you loved her, you wouldn't be here right now, putting her in danger just because you can't live with the consequences of your choices. Emmanuel pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. Do you know what this is? Sherry's eyes widened in terror. Emmanuel, please. It's insulin. Massive overdose. Will look like a diabetic emergency if anyone bothers to investigate, which they won't. Sherry Dickinson is already dead, remember? This will just be a Jane Doe who died of natural causes. You can't do this. I'll scream. I'll fight. No, you won't. Because if you do, I'll make sure Molly learns the truth about what you really are. I'll play her the recordings of you calling her a mistake. I'll show her the evidence of how you tried to kill me. I'll make sure she knows that her mother was a monster who cared more about money than family. The threat hit its mark. Whatever else Sherry was, she did care about how Molly remembered her. I'll disappear, she said desperately. I'll go away and never come back. You'll never see me again. You already had that chance. You chose to waste it. Emmanuel grabbed her arm and injected the insulin before she could react. The needle went in smoothly, and he depressed the plunger in one quick motion. How long? Sherry asked, already feeling the effects begin. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Enough time for last words, if you have any. Sherry stared out the windshield at Molly's school, watching children play in the distant playground. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her, even if I was bad at showing it. No, Emmanuel said firmly. I won't tell her anything. As far as Molly knows, you died 6 months ago. She's already grieved for you and moved on. She doesn't need to carry the burden of your regrets. As Sherry's breathing became labored and her consciousness began to fade, Emmanuel felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. This wasn't justice. It was simply necessary. Like putting down a rabid animal or removing a cancerous tumor, some things had to be done for the greater good. When it was over, Emmanuel called Isaac. It's done, he said simply. Any problems? None. She'll be found in a few hours, if at all. Another overdose victim in a stolen car. Emmanuel got out of the car and walked away, never looking back. Sherry Dickinson was finally, truly dead. The woman who had tried to destroy his family, who had endangered his daughter, who had chosen greed and betrayal over love and loyalty, was gone forever. As he drove home to pick up Molly from school, Emmanuel felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The threat was over. The betrayal was answered. Justice was served. That evening, as he helped Molly with her homework and listened to her talk about her friends and her dreams for the future, Emmanuel allowed himself to smile. They were safe now. They were free. And anyone who threatened his family again would learn the same lesson Sherry and Gregory had learned. Emmanuel Dickinson protected what was his, no matter the cost. Some debts could only be paid in blood, and Emmanuel was always prepared to collect.